All right. We're going to start talking today about one of the most important topics in computer science, which is methods. Now, methods are super important because usually, if you want to do something in your program, once you start getting really big, you'll have certain things that you want to do over and over and over again. And so that's when we'll define a method. And a method is just a chunk of code that does something that you can then call anytime you want. So you got this chunk of code, and whenever you call it, it's going to do all of this for you whenever you call it. And then when you call it again, it's going to do all that code for you. It's also important because the programming community is really large, and there are tasks that pretty much everyone across the board is going to want to do. And so they've already made methods that do these really useful things. So these methods already exist for you to use. And right now, we're making a lot of our own code. But once you get to a certain place, you really want to be using stuff that already exists and really only making new code whenever it doesn't exist. It's very important in programming not to reinvent the wheel. So it's very important to use methods that already exist. So methods are also called functions. You'll hear it called different things, different places, but it's the same thing. Before you write your method, you need to write your method header. Now, pretty much every method is public. We're not going to talk about static right now, but for now, let's go ahead and put static on all of our methods. Return type, which again, we're going to talk about in a second. Then what you do is you write the method name. So let's say I want a method that says, or that gives us the area of a circle. So I might call it circle area. Okay. And then the next thing that we need is parameters. Now, what parameters do is they're going to declare variables that we need to get the job done. Okay, whatever task we're trying to do, sometimes you need some variables to be declared and initialized to do the job. For example, if I wanted area of a circle, I can't just yell at the computer and say, "Give me the area of a circle." No matter how much I want it to do that, it can't do that without some information. It needs to know the radius. So what we do is in our parameters, we would say double radius. We're going to declare that variable. And whenever they call the method, they're going to feed it what's called an argument. Okay, it's the value that's going to initialize that variable. So instead of calling area of a circle, I would call area of a circle 7. And that 7 would be the argument that fills in the parameter. So again, a parameter is the variable that you're going to use, and the argument is the value of that variable provided when we call the method. If you don't know what I'm talking about, we're going to do an example here in a bit. Okay, so to call the method, you use whatever the name of the method is, and then it always has parentheses. Even if there are no parameters, those parentheses tell Java that you're talking about a method rather than a variable. But inside there, you pass whatever arguments you need to fill up these parameters. Okay, and one last thing, sometimes we're going to use methods from another class. If you're using methods from another class, before you do the method name, you have to say the class name dot method name. It's a little annoying at first. For a while, you'll feel like it's this dot this dot this, whatever. But you just have to call the class name first so it knows where to find that method that you're using. Okay. One last thing. I told you we weren't going to talk about return type yet. We don't really know what that is right now. We're going to set it to void. That means that our method isn't returning anything. Okay, examples. So here is a very stupid method, okay? It's public static, and it's void because it doesn't return anything, and I'm calling it insult, okay? There are no parameters. There's nothing there's nothing that needs to be passed in, because all this method does is it prints out, you stink, okay? So all I have to do to call it is say insult. Something else you need to notice is that this method is defined outside of the main method because it is another method. Okay, we don't put methods inside methods. We don't define methods inside other defined methods. All right. Now this one is a little different because this one has a parameter. Instead of just saying, do this thing, it's saying, do this thing, and I need you to tell me how many times to do it. So I am saying we're going to declare this int, which is times, the number of times it's going to happen. And then in my for loop, you'll notice I go ahead and use the number of times. So instead of printing this once, I print it however many times they ask me to. And when I call it, they have to include an integer here, because otherwise I don't know how many times they want me to do it. Finally, you'll notice I've called this method called greet and this other method called introduction, but I've put in a different class in front. That's because I have another class that's part of this package that I can view. So if I want to call this from the greeting class, I have to put greeting dot whatever my method name is. And so I've got these methods right here. I've got a very simple one that just prints hello, no parameters. I've got another one that has two strings as a parameter. So hello, and then you have to give them the name and then your name. But again, to call this, I have to say that we're using the greeting class. So let's run this. So many insults, we fed in 5, so it ran 5 times. Insult, no parameters, it just runs. Okay, 3, this runs 3 times. Greeting, greet, no parameters required, it just does what it's supposed to. Introduction, we gave them these parameters and they ran. So this is kind of our first look at methods. These are really important and we're going to dig deeper into how to use them.